this ESS revision video for module topic 8.3, solid domestic waste, and today we're looking at the production and management of solid domestic. So solid domestic waste effectively is our garbage or our rubbish or our waste materials from our houses and from shops. It accounts for 5% of the total waste that is produced worldwide, 95% being agricultural or industrial. And in terms of how much we produce, on average, the average person produces 3.5 kilograms per day in the US and 1.4 kilograms per day in the UK. So first of all, you need to understand the term waste. So waste is a material that has no value to the producer, okay, or to the user effectively as well, and is a problem obviously if it's not recycled and it needs to be disposed of. But it is a difficult process in terms of what is waste, because different people will think different things are waste. So someone might throw it away, but we do, as you'll be aware, have people on landfills literally scavenging for products they find valuable. So there are differences within human society as to what waste is. We do create, however, waste in most processes, including energy production, industry, etc. So there are two main types of waste: industrial solid waste, which could be stuff associated with mining, agriculture, and manufacturing, and then there's solid waste from homes and workplaces called municipal. Now, waste can come from our uses in an economy, so we're going to be looking at things called a circular economy. But this diagram here shows you a linear economy, which is the idea that we take a resource and we extract that resource, and then we make whatever we're going to make out of it, and we waste that resource, so we dispose of it as a waste. And that is obviously unsustainable, because the resources will in fact run out, okay, and we can't just keep filling landfills constantly without trying to reduce it. So a circular economy is more sustainable. So this is the idea that we will manufacture a product, we will use the product, we will then recycle the product where possible and continue that cycle of process. And this helps because it helps us restore the environment. It uses renewable energy, being a way to make it more sustainable. We can try and eliminate toxic waste being produced and eradicate as much waste as we can through design, increase recycling as a result. And an example of a circular economy is aluminium cans. So aluminium cans originally come from an ore called bauxite, aluminium oxide. We use lots of energy to make aluminium, but because we can save so much energy in the recycling, the aluminium doesn't decay, we can enter then into a circle of aluminium reuse. Now, examples of principal circular economies principles of the economy is, what can we do to make economies more circular? So basically, circular economies have been seen in more agricultural practices that have been more sustainable. So if you think about agricultural and just general circular economies, how can we get rid of waste? Well, in agriculture, we can reduce food impact, but let's say in manufacturing, we can reduce the amount of plastic and metals being used, the raw materials being used. We can build resilience through diversity, so in habitats and agriculture, we can have more complex ecosystems. And in economy, we can have more connections and more components be reused in examples. Renewable energy sources, so in agriculture, energy, solar energy, human labour, fewer chemicals and fossil fuels being used. And in economy, we can shift taxation from labour to non-renewable energy sources, so we can charge more for the use of them. We can talk about thinking systems, so we can think about how the systems are non-linear in both cases, and we can also think about cascades happening. So decomposition in farmland is useful, we can then reuse that material, and we can produce less waste in So if we want to manage solid domestic waste, we can first of all minimise the solid domestic waste. So how do we minimise it? Well, we can maintain possessions to make them last longer. We can change our shopping habits, so we buy less products that we don't need. We can buy longer lasting products as a result, look for less packaging because we don't need it, buy recycled products, choose energy efficient devices, avoid imports because they've travelled further using more fossil fuels, and be aware of home energy usage. And a lot of those things the public is generally starting to do now in order to as a result of awareness. We can also reuse things. So we can reuse things over and over again for different purposes. So in some countries there are returnable bottle schemes where you get money back or a discount for returning the bottles. They are very successful. You can compost food waste, and people can do that on small scales or on big scales. You can use clothes as cleaning rags, so reusing them, and reading e-books means less resources. And they're just a few examples. We can also try and recycle. So recycling is when you melt it down and remake raw materials into a new product. And this can be done by collecting it, separating waste materials into different groups. You then can have economic impacts. So basically, if it's cheaper to do, recycling is often very successful. So if we talked about earlier aluminium, it's cheaper to recycle aluminium than make new aluminium. And this is because it uses less energy. The other thing we can do then is we can get rid of that waste. So how do we dispose of it? So there's a couple of different options normally used. Landfills is a common area, and landfills can be used for toxic and non-toxic waste, which are effectively buried in the ground, which is initially very cheap, but then it can become expensive if problems happen later. So where are landfills generally used? Well, they're generally used away from high populations and away from watercourses. They are lined with plastic to prevent leachates escaping, and leachates are collected in pipes. So at the bottom, if there is these dangerous chemicals leaking out, they can be collected in. Methane, which is produced naturally from breaking down organic matter such as food as it decays, can be collected to produce electricity. That can be used to power that site. Every day, extra soil will be pushed over the top of the current layer of landfill to stop the smell to the locals and to reduce rats and other pests appearing. But as we do this, it's getting harder and harder. So these are negatives now to find new sites. Old sites can be reused once the landfill is shut. You can build on them, but there can be issues with subsidence or leakage as a result. And not many people would knowingly want to live above an old landfill. So this is a picture here to show you what a landfill might look like. So again, plastic lining around the outside, pipes to collect methane in order to stop those pollutants leaking out of habitat. Second method can be incinerators. So incinerators are when we burn waste at high temperatures of above 2000 degrees. Often it'll be sorted before we put the waste in there to burn, and that will be to take out incombustible things, things that don't burn very easily, and recyclable material that we can recycle and reuse. The heat produced from the incinerators can be used to heat buildings or local buildings or the building itself, and it can also be used to generate electricity in what we call waste to energy incineration. So the energy can be used because it would be a very big waste not to use that waste as energy. But obviously there are problems. All of the emissions that come in at the top can cause pollution, so we can have control systems, but they will still release some pollution into the atmosphere. They do, however, use less land, so that's a good thing, but they are expensive to build, and actually you need a constant stream of waste to burn because you can't afford to turn them off and restart burning them again. That would waste too much money. So it sort of actually encourages waste disposal and burning, which isn't a good. There are two groups of incinerators which can be used to degrade organic matter. So you can use a biodegradable an anaerobic digestion system to break down matter like, again, food, old plant materials, and dead organisms, where microbes will break it down. That produces methane, and we can also make fertilizers from it. And you can also break down food using compost, and that is an example on a large scale. You can use methane as well. So what is the best strategy? Well, this is a really difficult question. So you could be asked to weigh up, is a landfill or an incinerator better? And obviously they are all got positives and negatives compared to each other. So it depends on what the government's looking for. If you're looking for less pollution, then you might look at the landfill because there's less air pollution being released. But you've obviously, with an incinerator, you've got less chance or no chance of leaching into the local ground. The costs, obviously a landfill is cheaper, but you've got to find new locations, whereas an incinerator will burn all the waste. So one smaller location can be done. Employment, because how much it affects the local area is going to be impacted, whether that affects jobs in the local area. No one wants to live near a landfill and smell it all the time. Energy supplies, obviously we can generate some energy from both, probably more from an incinerator. And culturally, some people find landfills less acceptable now, but as we move on to more concern about the atmosphere, some people would be more against incinerators. And again, as per usual, you are expected to be able to talk about how you could reduce the solid domestic waste. So we can do this in 3 stages. 1, we alter human activities. And how do we alter human activities for waste and producing solid domestic waste? Ones we've done is reducing packaging, increased recycling, and reusing goods and containers, and composting organic matter. Step 2, how do we control the release of the pollutant? Well, we can control the release of the pollutant by separating waste into different types and then recycling. And when we burn things, not burning all pollutants together, we can legalise about waste separation and also legalise about recycling. We can educate people on waste separation, and we can tax certain items, and if people throw away, charge them more or give money back to people who recycle some of these items. And the third one, we need to, how can we reduce the impact on society? Well, landfills can be carefully reclaimed. We can use incinerators, so we're using less land, and we can collect plastics from where they've been dumped, so places like the Pacific garbage patch. We can also pull out the leachates from landfills and treat them to get rid of the toxic poisonous chemicals.